Today's lecture will be over Chapter 10, Section 4. Section 4 objectives. Number 1, explain the two major divisions of South America. Number 2, describe the national culture of Brazil. Number 3, explain the economic strength of Brazil. And number 4, describe Brazilian life today. We start off talking about the Treaty of Tordesillas, which in 1494 was an agreement between Spain and Portugal, which gives Portugal control of what would be Brazil. If we look at a world map, we can see that Portugal and Spain are going to be very close to each other on the Iberian Peninsula. This is important because Portugal in the 1400s, especially the late 1400s, is going to create a school of sailing with Prince Henry the Navigator. They're going to go ahead and they're going to continue around the southern tip of Africa, Bartholomew Diaz being the first, and Vasco da Gama being the first to completely go all the way to India. This is important because this allows Portugal to have a waterway to India instead of going across land that is predominantly Muslim. This also allows Portugal to carry more and thus are able to sell more items. So what we see is that Spain is in dire need to make sure that they are catching up with Portugal. They're so in need that they're going to go ahead and they're going to have Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492. Columbus believes that the earth is actually much smaller than it truly is. However, at this time, Spain and the rest of the world believed that the size of the earth was much bigger. The idea that the world was flat was never actually on any educated person's mind. So what we see is that Portugal is so dominant coming around the southern tip of Africa that Spain is going to try to catch up. And Columbus's idea is very simple. He's going to sail west, and when he comes out the other side, he's going to get to India much, much, much faster. So, of course, we all know the story. He's going to go ahead and set sail for Spain, and he's going to end up in about Central America. What we see then is that when he lands here, he believes that he's actually landed in India, and that's why he calls the people that he sees first Indians. But as we all know, they're actually going to go ahead and they're actually going to be a new land right here. And what we see then is that Spain is going to continue to sail west, and they start setting up sugar plantations and colonizations in this land. Now, the predominant power at this time is Portugal, and they're unhappy because they want a little chunk of the western lands. And so in 1494, the treaty actually says that they're going to divide the world right down the middle. And what we see is that anything east of this line is going to be Portugal, and anything west is going to be Spain. This is important because today in Brazil, the predominant language is Portuguese, and the predominant language in the western part, in Mexico, Central America, and South America, is going to be Spanish. So this is why it's important to understand this split with Portugal and Spain, and again, the Treaty of Tordesillas. Now, about 1.5 million natives are in the area before the colonization in the 1500s. And what we see is that Spain is very excited because they believe that they're going to be able to get a lot of gold and silver. What actually happens is that they don't find them, and what we see is that Spain is going to get its sugar plantations going. This is very important because this is going to lead to Spain being able to continue to get gold money from the sugar plantations instead of just going into the Native American lands. What we see is they start to settle on the coast and they put the natives to work on the plantations in the interior. However, the natives are going to die soon, which will lead to the African slave trade. People who think that the African slave trade started in the United States are only seeing a portion of the story. We actually are seeing Spain starting the African slave trade. Today, Brazil is a mix of European, African ancestry, along with that native ancestry as well. Now, independence for Brazil. Portugal is a colony from 1500 to 1822. What we see is that Napoleon is going to invade Portugal in 1807. And the leaders of Portugal are going to be very worried about this. So what they're going to do is that they're going to move to Brazil. So from 1807 to 1815, when Napoleon is defeated, the royal court is actually living in Brazil. This is important because they build it up to become a good country or somebody that could turn into a new country. Dom Pedro is going to come along, and here's a picture of him. And what we see is that he is going to go ahead and he's going to be asked by the Brazilians to become the rightful king. And what we see then is that in September 1822, he will go ahead and he will declare independence from Portugal, which makes Brazil their own country. Now, today we have about 200,000 native people that remain in the Amazon rainforest. We see immigrants from places like Portugal, Germany, Italy, Spain, Lebanon, and Syria. Interestingly enough, the largest Japanese population outside of Japan is Brazil. Of course, the language that is spoken in Brazil is Portuguese because Portugal owned that land for a long period of time. Also, the largest Catholic population in the world resides in Brazil, but we do see a 20% Protestant religion, as well as a mix of African beliefs and also Catholicism. In 1957, what we're going to see is that the people of Brazil are going to go ahead and they're going to move the capital from the coast to the interior, about 600 miles inland. The idea is simple. What they want to do is that they want to start having the people go from the coastland to basically the inside of Brazil. This is going to be almost a reverse urbanization effect. Now, what we see with Brazil is actually a very industrialized power. You might wonder why would they have the Olympics there a couple of years ago. It's in fact, Brazil is actually a very powerful country. They're driven by an abundance of natural resources because their land is so big. Iron, bauxite, tin, manganese, also gold, silver, titanium, chromite, tungsten, quartz. All of these are going to be natural resources that are going to be mined in this area. Electricity from power plants on numerous rivers, including the Amazon, make it so that they don't have to buy power from anywhere else. They also have oil and natural gas, which they can go ahead and produce. They become highly industrialized, along with the steel industry and automobile plants. They start making a lot of money. And what we also see is that there's a vast gap between the rich and the poor. We talked about urbanization before, and people start going to the cities looking for jobs. So when they are in the rural areas, they're going to have the push factors that are going to push them away and push them into the cities. The pull factors of the cities is that they're actually going to have better jobs. In 1960, 22% of the people lived in the cities, and only 35 years later, 75% live in the cities. Now, when they migrate to the cities, sometimes they're also going to migrate to the interior. The interior economy is based on the farming of cerrado, which is fertile grassland. So you will see this movement to the inland a little bit more than what you see in other countries. Now, you're also going to have different types of Brazilian life. Carnival is a colorful festival day in Brazil and the Caribbean countries. Features the music of the samba. This is a Brazilian dance with African influences. Copiera is going to be a Brazilian martial arts and dance with African origins. If you guys ever watch MMA, sometimes they put up the type of fighting that they are specializing in, and some of these people from Brazil actually have Copiera as their main fighting skills. Now, the city life in Rio de Janeiro, it's a cultural center of Brazil. You're going to see a bunch of different types of settings with the bays, the beaches, and the mountains, but poverty is still very, very alive. We see the slums of the favelas, which is crime and drug abuse. And this is an example of a picture right here where you see many, many people in a very small area of land. And what we see is that this becomes kind of a breeding area for people and crime and poverty and things like that. So what we try to do is that we try to see this lifestyle in Brazil as being very good in some areas, but they also have a lot of slums. This concludes our presentation over Chapter 10, Section 4. At this point, you should be going and you should be completing the assessments found on Edmodo.